Which leads me to question, is School Days the worst anime of all time? Honestly, no. I've seen anime worse than School Days that have far more problems.
Yeah, I knew that was going to come back to bite me in the ass someday. Sword Art Online, like School Days, is one of the most polarizing anime I've ever seen. You have the people who think it's the best thing ever, the people who enjoyed it but can acknowledge its flaws, and the people who thought it was the shits and hate it. That's 3 different perspectives right there. Sadly, however, we won't be doing the perspective system to explain Sword Art Online. Instead, we're going to break this review down into several parts, deconstructing what made the first 14 episodes, also known as the Aincrad arc, such a piece of shit. And I know, I just heard the collective groan of many Aincrad arc fans, but please, keep an open mind going into this review. With that said, before I start the summary of what Sword Art Online actually is, for those who don't know, and those who'd like to be refreshed, I feel like I should dispel some misconceptions that people seem to have about this anime. Number 1. Sword Art Online is an anime about a video game. It's not. Sword Art Online is about a romance that just happens to take place in a video game. More on this later. Number 2. Sword Art Online had a cool concept. It didn't. It's actually quite stupid and very nonsensical. More on this later. Number 3. Sword Art Online started off great and got terrible around the 14 episode mark. No, Sword Art Online was always pretty bad, and it certainly got worse as time went on, but I don't think for a single second that this tripe could ever really have been considered good. So, what is Sword Art Online? Sword Art Online is a series of light novels that were adapted into an anime in 2012 by A1 Pictures, who have worked on anime like Fairy Tail, Maggie, Black Butler, Blue Exorcist, and Alnoa Zero. SAO revolves around a teen named Kirito who gets trapped in a virtual reality MMORPG and must, with 10,000 other players, clear the game to get back to the real world. The catch here is that if you die in SAO, you die in real life. Along the way, he meets characters such as Klein, Agiel, Silica, Lisbeth, and Asuna. The first half's main antagonist is Kayaba Akihiko, who is the one responsible for the creation of SAO and the entrapment of all the players inside of it. With all this, you should now have a basic understanding of what SAO is, so let's not waste any time, and let's delve into what makes this arc so horrendous. I want you to imagine that a game called Sword Art Online has popped up on Steam. It's an MMORPG priced at $49.99. Now, the smart consumer wouldn't buy this game right off the bat. They'd wait for the reviews to come in before putting down this amount of money on a video game. I can tell you right now that if Sword Art Online was ever actually released, of course without the virtual reality gimmick attached to it, that it would be the worst game released that year. Total Biscuit, Jim Sterling, and Yahtzee would have a fucking field day with this game, just ripping it to shreds, because at the end of the day, Sword Art Online is a terrible game, and it hurts the anime overall, even if you don't realize it. For starters, SAO is an RPG without magic.
An RPG without magic? That's a bold decision, man!
No, it's not a bold choice, it's a stupid choice. Magic exists in RPGs for a number of reasons. Adding variety to the melee combat to gameplay is arguably the #1 reason. Because SAO has no magic, this not only cheapens the gameplay, but it also makes it pretty shallow. You see, magic also has another purpose in one's arsenal, and that is for long-range attacks. If your opponent is significantly stronger than you, magic can be used to hit them from a distance and give you the upper hand. In SAO, however, there is no magic, so attacking someone from far away via mana or magic is completely out of the question. This wouldn't be so bad if SAO had ranged weapons like bows and arrows or staffs, but you guessed it, SAO has no bows and arrows or staffs. So the only way to deliver real damage to an opponent is to get up close with them, and anyone who has played an RPG before knows that this can be frustrating with certain enemies. In fact, most of them that are several levels higher than you. And before anyone says anything, I realize that the game is called Sword Art Online. Hell, the first episode of the anime is called World of Swords, which is why, of course, it makes absolute sense for there to be axes and maces in the game. Because axes and maces are swords. Swords in the game mostly inflict damage through sword skills, which are combat motions. The anime never really explains what these things are or how they work, but I'm sure that there are a lot of them. One of them, for instance, is the dual wielding skill. Now, listen to this. The dual wielding skill is given to a single player in the game as an exclusive skill. The player with the fastest reflexes in the game gets the skill. Now, how this is determined is never explained. Essentially, unless you have the fastest reflexes in the game, you cannot dual wield swords. So on top of not having magic, bows and arrows, or staffs, unless you're the fastest player in the game, you can't even dual wield. Moving on, Sword Art Online also doesn't have a job system.
The job I rolled is knight. Dude, there's no job system in this game.
A job system in an RPG is what allows you to choose between different classes so you're not fixed into one particular job for the entire game. So in SAO, you're either a knight or not a knight. The anime shows us that it's possible to be a blacksmith, a merchant, or a cook, but in terms of being a combatant, what do you really have? You can't be a mage or an archer because SAO doesn't have those mechanics, but you could have been a hunter or a samurai or a thief because all three of these involve mechanics that SAO already has. But too bad, everyone in the game is going to be a knight. Once again, SAO kills variety for no real reason at all. Keep in mind, SAO is an MMORPG, which stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. Who would want to play an MMORPG where combat is very cheapened by the lack of magic and job system? Oh, you can be a knight in SAO? Who gives a shit? There's hundreds of MMORPGs that let you be a knight better and give you access to more classes. And that's not all. SAO also does not have respawning bosses. If a boss on a particular floor is beaten, they don't respawn. Needless to say, this kills the entire challenge of an MMO if the test of your power and grinding doesn't exist. And in a multiplayer atmosphere like this, the goal of the game is not to kill other players, it's to clear the 100 floors. I can only imagine it being boring if every time you want to find a boss, you come to find out that it's already been killed. On top of all this, Sword Art Online has horrible world building. SAO has 100 floors, and most of the locations in all of them look nearly identical. The only town of any note in the anime that is mentioned time and time again is the Town of Beginnings, which is on the first floor. We know fuck all about floors 2 through 76, which are explored in the anime, and by the look of it, there isn't much to know to begin with. There's locations for quests and such, yes, but for a game this large, they seem to be very few and far between. To tally that all up, we've got repetitive levels, one class to choose from in terms of combat, bosses that don't respawn, extremely limited weapon options, and gameplay that is crippled by the lack of long-range attacks. One might say that it's okay for the game to be lacking in some places because in-universe it is a virtual reality MMORPG, but that is complete bullshit. Touchscreens did not make shitty games any better. Motion controls did not make shitty games any better. Increasing interactivity between the player and the game has historically never made a game any better. In many cases, it actually makes it worse. If I picked up a VR headset and loaded up Bubsy 3D, it wouldn't suddenly become a better, more fun game because I was playing inside of the universe. It would still be total ass. Besides, I'm not sure why you'd want to waste your time in a shitty MMO like that when there would have to be better VR games in this universe to play.
Sword Art Online is ass. OP to ED and everything in between, the whole thing stinks and I hate it. But I didn't always. As a matter of fact, when the series first started airing, I thought, this is okay. I mean, I've seen better, but I've seen worse too. I'll see where this goes. Somewhere between that and this, though, that stopped being my response to the show. At a certain point, I could no longer form words and was mostly just vomiting blood for the duration of each episode. And I'm not alone in that. Pretty much everyone over the age of 12 agrees that this show sucks. What they don't agree on is when it started sucking. When did Sword Art Online get terrible? Some would say it happened when they locked the only likable character in a rape dungeon and made Kirito's sister wanna fuck him. Others would point to the gratuitous tentacle rape scene. And boy gee whiz, there sure is an excessive amount of sexual assault in this show. Then there's the I told you so camp, who say it was terrible all along, and all of the bullshit just made you realize that after the fact. All of them are wrong. All of you are wrong. I'm right. Listen to me. There's a precise moment when Sword Art Online goes from being okay to being one of the worst fucking shows ever. And it's all this asshole's fault. Yeah, you heard me. Your innocent Dotaru ruined fucking everything. Let me explain. In the beginning, Sword Art Online had some stuff going for it. Not a lot, the fight choreography was always pretty bad, the cast was always bland, and the premise was never original, but it had a solid sense of tone. We'd seen trapped in an MMO stories before, but never with this kind of horror tinge to them. The world of Aincrad had this oppressive air hanging over it. From very early on, there was this sense that just about anyone could die at any moment. The first few episodes do a great job of establishing that. And while it didn't break any new ground in terms of character writing, it had some good standalone episode plots, like the one where all Kirito's friends got murdered, and the whole murder mystery thing where they're trying to figure out how somebody was breaking the rules of the game, and actually, those were the only really interesting episodes, but hey, lots of okay shows have had less. The main thing that the show had going for it early on was that underlying sense of dread. It felt like something where nobody, except for this one guy, was ever really safe. Nobody important died after the first few episodes, but that was fine for a while. If the show was kill happy all the time, that would be a problem in itself. You've got to pace these things. It's hard to get attached when characters are going in and out through a revolving door. Still, by episode 10, there had been enough near misses that it seemed like Kirito and his harem might be a little too invulnerable. It seemed like the right time to kill someone off to raise the stakes. It's at this point that they chose to introduce Yui. If you don't know, congratulations, you've saved yourself from a shitty show, but Yui is a little girl who Kirito and Asuna find wandering around the woods near their home and decide to adopt as their daughter. She's sweet and innocent and might as well be walking around with a timer counting down to her sad death. Now, it's cheap and lazy enough to introduce a pure cinnamon roll character purely for the sake of killing them off, but that's not nearly bad enough writing on its own to drag this show down to the total dogshit territory it now occupies. The bigger problem with this is tied to what Yui is. See, Yui is actually a fully sentient AI, which means that she's the only character in the entire cast who, if killed, could be brought back. And that's very, very bad for the show, because if Yui dies and is then brought back, that renders the threat of death from a narrative standpoint permanently meaningless. And remember, as of this episode, that's the only interesting thing about SAO. death in media isn't interesting because, oh, they're dead, that's sad, I'm sad. It's interesting because it inherently changes the dynamics of a story. A character who was once a force in the narrative now isn't. Any arc that they might have been going through is cut abruptly short, and from this point forward, the writers can't rely on their presence to move the story forward or build up other characters. Most stories never pull that trigger, and I'm cool with that because, like I said, it's hard to write around. I'm okay with the show being a little toothless as long as the story is engaging and the characters are fun, and there are plenty of ways to make your characters suffer without killing them off. But when a show acts like death means something and then does something that very transparently reveals that the writers aren't willing to sacrifice potential plot lines, it's like watching Mickey Mouse take his head off at Disneyland. It ruins the magic. There are rules against this kind of shit. If a character dies and is brought back, you might as well write, and then they got on a bus for a couple of weeks, for all the fucking difference it makes. So obviously, when the show was airing, I was really dreading this prospect. I was hoping that the show would pull something out of left field, maybe fake me out and kill Asuna or Kirito off, instead of do the stupid, obvious thing that it was definitely going to do. But then, of course, I got to the end of episode 12 and I watched Kirito and Asuna mourn for little baby Skynet, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It was worse! They don't just kill Yui off in the most trite way possible, they do it while immediately undercutting all of the dramatic weight of the moment. Because as Yui is being deleted, Kirito pulls some techno-wizardry out of his ass to store her in an inventory item. And because of that dumb Dragon Feather episode, we know that means she's coming back. They could at least have left it ambiguous as to whether or not they could bring her back, but nope! Can't let anyone think their waifu might not come back. They might stop watching and giving us money. But even that isn't the most asinine thing about this scene. In this moment, as they reach the Game Master's console in the depths of this dungeon, Kirito reveals the heretofore unknown fact that he's a PhD level programmer, thus irreparably ruining his character forever. Kirito was already stupidly overpowered, but at least it made a bit of sense. He was a beta tester, so his base skill level being higher than most other players was justified. And doing kendo in real life gave him good reflexes. And he spent like the first year of the game solo queuing instead of socializing to reach his ridiculously high experience level. That became less believable as he also proved to apparently be the most eligible bachelor on the entire internet, but you can at least justify that as girls having a crush on him for saving their lives rather than that coming down to any innate social skill on his part. It's easy to justify a lot of things about Kirito because he has no defined personality at all. But when you add to those traits the fact that he's got the scripting skills to not just hack the game from inside it, but to custom write code in the space of a few seconds to store data as an in-game object, I've got to call bullshit. Hacking games requires time and at least some knowledge of the source code. There's no way Kirito has that. Even if the 1,000 or so carefully selected beta testers for SAO were data mining the shit out of the game, they only had it for a little over a month during summer vacation, and they only saw a fraction of the content. It would be hard to get a full picture of how the game works in that time frame under normal circumstances, but SAO is also the first game of its kind, built from the ground up for incredibly complicated, brand new proprietary hardware. So already, Kirito's doing something that nobody outside the company should know how to do. But even if we assume that there's a command already in place to store a script as an in-game object, think about what he's storing. Yui is a fucking AI, the most complicated kind of program conceivable. Her code needs to be immense to account for the broad variety of situations she might need to deal with. And it also needs to be capable of rewriting itself on the fly in real time. Kirito is taking that huge, complex code, saving its current state of operation, and converting that information into a custom item in a game whose script he must be figuring out in real time, all in the space of a few seconds. No! Not fucking possible! In this moment, Kirito ceases to be a real human being, and I lose all suspension of disbelief for this entire show. It's just not believable that any person could be capable of pulling off the shit that we've seen him do up to this point. Maybe some of it, but not all of it, and especially not a 14-year-old fucking child! Also, as if he wasn't special enough already, the scene establishes a few moments earlier that he and Asuna are the only people to ever experience love or joy in SAO during the entire 2 years that the game has been running. This is so fucking stupid, it hurts! This scene amazes me for how thoroughly it manages to ruin the entire show. It would be bad enough to ruin the whole story by implicitly admitting that they never plan to kill off anyone who's had any kind of character development ever again, unless dying is part of their story arc, but in doing so they also manage to make it impossible to relate to their protagonist. From this point forward, the show has no dramatic stakes. It can't have any. Kirito's been established to be able to do basically anything, and we now know for a fact that no one important will ever really die. And if you want to nitpick, this scene raises a ton of questions too. The big one being, why? Why is that what Kirito did with his back-end access? If he had the time to isolate a huge complex program and store it as environmental data and write a custom script to save that file to his personal computer, why didn't he, I don't know, globally reactivate the game's logout function? He had access to the fucking source code, and that would have been a lot simpler. There was probably just one value he needed to set from true to false, or maybe a few lines of code that had been commented out. Comparatively speaking, it would have been easy and he'd have been saving, I don't know, upwards of like 7,000 people's lives? But no, preserving his wife's Tamagotchi is a lot more important than that. There's been a lot of complaining in this video and not a lot of hard analysis, but that's because there's not much in this scene to analyze. This is one of the most flat, boring scenes that I've ever watched in anything. Every shot is static and dull, especially the obvious, predictable reaction shots that it uses to ham-fistedly attempt to tug at your heartstrings. And the set is a blank, white room with nothing going on. There's basically nothing to even look at here. That said, if nothing else, I guess I can take solace in the fact that nobody was even trying when they made the scene that ruined the whole show. But
here's the moment you've all been waiting for. The moment where I tear these horrible 14 episodes a new asshole. Before I do that though, I'd like to say something to the light novel readers of Sword Art Online. It's to my knowledge that many of the things that I'm about to point out are talked about or explained in the light novel. I understand that. What you have to understand is that I'm not talking about the light novel. The light novel and the anime are two completely different entities, as they should be. A light novel is not to an anime what a guide or a manual is to a video game. So please, don't try to justify how shit this anime is by saying that it's all explained in the light novel. And don't be mad at me for pointing out the flaws in the anime. Be mad at the anime for giving your light novel series such a shitty name. Adaptations of popular novels should strive to not only accurately portray their source material, but to improve on it if necessary and bring fans to the franchise. And they very well can't do that if the adaptation is shit. Now then, where the fuck do I even begin with all this bullshit? There is so much wrong with these 14 episodes that I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around how something could be so poorly written. If SAO had any more holes, you could order it on a sandwich at Subway. Let's begin on episode 1 with the concept of Sword Art Online. I personally find this entire concept ridiculous. Kayaba Akihiko traps 10,000 people inside of a video game. If they die in the game, they die in real life. If you try to take their nerve gears off, they die. If Sword Art Online had gone on for maybe a week or two, the concept could fall within the realm of plausibility. However, SAO goes on for over 2 years. That's 2 years that the surrounding world allowed this to take place. It is outrageous to think that Kayaba Akihiko would not have been found and arrested within this time. And even if he wasn't, people couldn't hack the game from the outside. Kirito showed us that he's capable of hacking the game from the inside, so this makes no sense at all. What Sword Art Online would have been to this world would be the largest hostage situation in recorded history. Bullshit, it goes on for 2 years. SAO going on for 2 years also creates other large problems within the plot, namely the safety of the players. Asuna mentions that at one point, many players went offline while being transferred to hospitals. Okay, that does make sense. What doesn't make sense is the safety of the characters who lived alone. A prime example is Klein. How the fuck is Klein even alive? Klein lives alone. And unless some massive sweep of IP addresses was done to find players that hadn't been reported to hospitals, Klein should have died of starvation, as should have all the other players who didn't have families or lived alone. But nope, this is never once brought up in the anime at all. Another gigantic problem in SAO comes in the form of the nerve gear. This sort of device, existing in our lifetimes, borders on impossible, but that's where our suspension of disbelief kicks in. That's fine. However, we're immediately kicked back into reality when SAO abuses the nerve gear's logic and creates a bunch of plot holes with it. First off, Kirito says that pain cannot be felt in SAO. Yet throughout the entire anime, whenever someone is hurt, they always wince or start screaming. The logical argument for why this is happening is that it's a psychological reaction, but of course, the anime never tells us this or even implies it. Secondly, if you can't feel pain, why would you be able to feel cold like Lisbeth does, taste anything like various people do in the anime, or feel pleasure when having sex? To put it extremely simply, the nervous system doesn't work like this. In real life, there's people that suffer from a disorder called congenital analgesia, or congenital insensitivity to pain. These people cannot feel pain because the neurons that send pain signals to their brains are blocked off. And guess what? Most of the people with this disorder cannot smell, feel hot and cold, and often have a difficult time experiencing pleasure. All of which are done in SAO with no problem despite the fact that they can't feel pain. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that SAO is not about a video game, but a romance that just happens to take place in a video game. This cannot possibly ring more true if you actually examine the game like I have. So many things are glossed over, it's ridiculous. For example, leveling, which is huge in MMORPGs, is completely shafted. In episode 1, Kirito is level 1. In episode 3, he's level 40. In episode 4, he's level 78. And in episode 10, after the 2-year time skip, he's only level 96. My point here is that how someone levels up, or at what rate they do, is never explained, and Kirito's arbitrary level jumps prove that. So on top of SAO being shown to be a shitty game with little variation, and leveling never explained, SAO, the anime, falls back on stupid romance. Episodes 1, 2, 10, and 13 are the only fucking episodes that move the plot along. The rest of the episodes are filler. However, they're filler in the same way that Bleach's Fullbring arc is filler. They're technically canon, but you could take a large chunk of them out because they're worthless and the plot could move along without a hitch. The remaining episodes in SAO deal with Kirito meeting other women like Silica and Lisbeth, or bonding with Asuna and marrying her. All of this at the expense of the actual game and anime. Speaking of Asuna, she is supposed to be very powerful, but we never see her training. In fact, the only skill she's supposedly maxed out is her cooking skill, and everyone is always mentioning how famous she is, but never what she's actually famous for. And this brings me to my next point. Kirito is overpowered as fuck. I just mentioned that he went from level 1 to 78 in 4 episodes, but he's always shown dicking around. He has never actually shown training at all. Give me one good reason why Kirito is as strong as he is. Keep in mind, this is the same guy who tanked like 7 players attacking him at once. The same guy who took down the event boss when 2 different guilds were looking for him. The same guy who took out Kuradil in 5 seconds, and the same guy who was so damn strong that he forced the programmer of the game to cheat in his fight with him. The argument that he's strong because he's a beta tester is bullshit. If that's true, why aren't any of the other beta testers as strong as him? Hell, Kirito himself said that the other beta testers were noobs. Other than this, there's no real reason except for him being the protagonist that he's this strong. The same goes for Asuna, as I already mentioned, except she's even worse because she's never shown at any time dedicating time to fighting. She's maxed out her cooking skill and is popular for being popular? Everything I've said up until this point brings me to the final nail in the coffin for SAO, that being the characters' actions, and some more plot holes. Stupid character actions strike as early as the second episode when Kibao says that the beta testers are evil. This is so stupid it hurts. Beta testers in games make sure that Sword Art Online is not Sword Art Over the Road Racing. They test for bugs and report them so that they can be fixed. They're the only reason the game is as stable as it is. But let's hate them anyways for reasons that don't even make sense. And what Kirito does for the beta testers at the end of episode 2 is also stupid, because instead of trying to reason with all these people, he just takes the blame himself, which doesn't even work in the grand scheme of things. Kirito as a character can only be described as a lying, arrogant sack of shit. We have already discussed that bosses in SAO do not respawn, so players who don't feel like endangering themselves in the game can live in safe zones and wait for the clearing forces and army to clear the game. When Sachi mentions this because she's not a complete idiot, Kirito agrees but says it's okay because he'll protect her, which encourages Sachi to fight, which gets her killed. If you're playing SAO for fun, like many in the game are, you're a fucking idiot, plain and simple. SAO is a death game, but it's a death game you can choose to participate in. It's like being thrown into Battle Royale and having the choice whether to sit and wait with Kitano while everyone kills each other off, or actually participating in the goddamn event like Kiriyama. Keep in mind, Kiriyama is insane and the only person who willingly signed up for Battle Royale. Meanwhile, everyone else who willingly participates in SAO is happy and smiling with rarely ever a care in the world. Another aspect of Kirito's character, or lack thereof, is his personality. He barely has one, and when he does, he's often an asshole to most of his friends. The most blatant example of this was the Lisbeth episode, where he's almost constantly berating her as if he were Stone Cold Kirito Austin.
If it breaks, then that's too bad!
Don't freak out! But I'm falling in love with you!
There's also the fact that Kirito is a goddamn loser with no life or friends, which is why despite him being extremely overpowered, the game isn't cleared within 2 years. If he truly cared about getting back to the real world, he'd be a permanent part of the clearing force. Instead, he's a solo player. And oh god, Kirito being a solo player is the worst. Kirito says that he's a solo player at the end of episode 2, and at the beginning of episode 3, he's in a guild. In episode 4, he teams up with Silica. In episodes 5 and 6, he teams up with Asuna. In episode 7, he teams up with Lisbeth. And only at the beginning of episode 8, after the 2-year time skip, do we see him alone. And in that same episode, not only does he team up with Asuna again, but by episode 11, they're fucking married. So explain to me, why does this stupid little shit keep saying he's a solo player? Oh, right, because it's edgy. He's edgy because he's alone. What a cool guy. Some of the players even refer to him as the solo player, as if he were the only one doing the solo act. And you know what? He very well may be, because being a solo player in a goddamn MMORPG death game is a stupid idea. Everyone else in the fucking game is either in a guild or not fighting at all. But Kirito has to be the dark and edgy solo player. Another thing about Kirito is that he's clearly a bitch. After losing to Heathcliff, the first thing that comes to his mind is, "Oh, he cheated. He's a cheater." Just because Heathcliff reacted very fast to an attack. Kirito says himself that there are thousands of sword skills, one of which could have hypothetically helped Heathcliff in a situation like this. But Kirito is beaten, and he's the mighty god of SAO, so if he lost, whoever beat him must clearly be cheating. Ugh. You want to know who SAO's best character is? It's Agiel. Not only does Agiel realize that the beta testers were not bad people because they left free guides for parts of the game at the stores, he also realizes that SAO is a death game and needs to be treated as such. so he becomes a merchant in a safe zone where he cannot possibly be killed. The only time he ventures into fighting again after this is during the Skull Reaper fight, and that's to support his friends in combat. Asuna turns into a tsundere halfway into the show, and a helpless one at that, because she needs Kirito to deal with Kurodeo. Klein is largely okay, but he does creep a little when Kirito mentions that he has a little sister. Silica is a dumb loli, Lisbeth is just waifu bait,
My wife is coming to life.
and Kayaba is fucking terrible. If the intent with Kayaba was to create a morally gray character, they failed. Although a strange example, Dexter Morgan is a fine illustration of a morally gray character done right.
Am I evil? Am I good? I'm done asking those questions. I don't have the answers. Does anyone?
Dexter has a clear moral conflict within himself that presents itself during season 2 of the series. Keep in mind, all of this is shown and not told. This is another problem with SAO. Things are told to us, but not shown. People being killed by the nerve gear? Told, not shown. Those 2,000 players being killed within a month of the game launching? Told, not shown. Kirito saving Sachi's guild? Told, not shown. Kayaba's dream to create a sky castle and his path to doing it? Told, not shown. And told in 1 minute or two before the anime ends in one of the dumbest monologues of all time. Not to mention, Kayaba simply forgets his motives for doing all of what he did in SAO. Never in any medium that I have read or seen has a villain simply forgotten why they're doing what they're doing. And with that, I am done. I'm sure that I have missed things here and there, and yes, while SAO does have semi-decent animation and a good soundtrack, it is not worth watching. I have seen these 14 episodes now in both Japanese and English. There is no distinction between the quality, they're both horrible. There is nothing, and I repeat, nothing redeemable or good about the Aincrad arc of Sword Art Online. Between the stupid characters, the idiotic decisions of these stupid characters, the plot holes, the bad writing, and the insultory plot, time could be better spent watching a dog lick its balls. This is why the Aincrad arc of Sword Art Online gets the final rating of, say it with me, rest in piss.
We need to make a big deal out of video games in the first scene, apparently. How does Jesus could not recognize Klein from this photo later? And wait, why was he looking at photos of dudes holding SAO if he had the game himself already? Shouldn't he be, playing it?
We'll be covering the internationally famous Sword Art Online, aka SAO.
Adventure starts once the hour passes cliche.
Link start!
And thus my nightmare begins. And Bryce Papenbrook.
You act like you know your way around here. You were in the beta test, weren't you?
Because he was running, you assumed he was a beta tester.
This thing's amazing. Makes me glad I was born when I was, you know?
It's not that big a deal.
Coming from the fucking beta tester.
During the beta test, SAO was the only thing on my mind, day and night. And even though it's a virtual world, I feel more alive in here than I ever did in the real one.
Didn't you just say it wasn't a big deal, like 10 seconds ago?
Too bad the food you eat here only satisfies your hunger virtually.
Yeah, for reals.
Was this script written by middle-aged hipster parents? Like, for reals?
The transmitter signals in the headgear work just like microwaves. If the safety's disabled, it could fry your brain.
Does no one in this entire fucking world check the helmets that hundreds of thousands of people wear for any possibility like this? If it's on the cover of this magazine, it should at least be thoroughly checked.
If I die in the game, I'll die in real life. Son of a... You're a guy? You're not 17!
Because the fact that he lied about his age is the main issue here.
This marks the end of the tutorial. and the official launch of Sword Art Online.
Don't tutorials offer guides on how to play and level up so noobs don't have to rely on beta testers? Everyone's favorite bitch. Everyone's favorite token lolly. Everyone's favorite side bitch. SAO's first Kirito save me scream. Did they seriously just copy and paste one face onto 7 different people?
Come on, Colin.
Out of 9,787 people, Jesus-kun is the only person to decide, hey, let's just do what the mass murderer fucking says. Plot convenience makes it so Jesus-kun goes solo to become said Jesus-kun. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only shot of Jesus-kun's mom, Mari-san. Or at least I think it is. Do you need some help getting that chicken bone out of your throat?
Next time, beat her.
A month time skip already? Even I didn't remember it being this bad.
And 2,000 people have died so far. After all this time, none of the players have been able to clear floor 1.
Looks like a job for Jesus-kun.
I used to be a beta tester, and even I haven't found out where the boss's lair is.
So you guys know the boss's weapons, attack patterns, and minions, but don't know the location of where he is? Opening gets viewer pumped only to be inevitably disappointed. Excuse me, all men are beaters. We don't like to be called out on it though.
My name is Diabel, and in this game, the job I rolled is knight.
Dude, there's no job system in this game.
You guys want to hear this or not?
2,000 people died? Sure, let's laugh about the game mechanics. How about you save the applause until you beat the actual fucking boss?
You got left out too, huh?
Just wait till you see what happens with her. Thus, this bullshit romance begins.
My name's Kibao. Got that? Before we take on the boss, I want to get something off my chest.
We gotta have a dumb shit.
The beta guys just up and vanished, right? They did stole us beginners. They snagged all the good hunting spots, and they grabbed all the easy quests too.
If that's the case, what the fuck has Jesus been doing for the past month? Agio, prepared to be neglected.
And whoever gets an item gets to keep it.
Well, no fucking shit. Cream does not soften hard bread.
I didn't come to this town to eat good food.
The irony is strong with this one.
I'm on it!
I thought she was a beginner, but she's got good skills.
She literally just ran in a straight line.
But you weren't like that, Diabel. You never abandoned the other players.
He went against the plan which would prevent anyone from dying. But sure, let's praise him. If there's no pain system, why does everyone look like they're actually dying? Can't you just heal him now? You have the potion in your hand. Just save him while he's giving the monologue. Asuna's reveal is over-exaggerated to make it seem like to the audience that she's actually gonna do something in this series. 1 down, 99 to go. Or, I mean 74 to go.
He used to be a beta tester! Think about it! He knew the boss's attack patterns! He knew, but he kept it from us! And I bet he's not the only beta tester here!
So let me get this straight. Even when they made a guidebook, stayed back to make a plan, and helped you defeat the boss, because they're beta testers, all of that is null and void? When people are pissed at you, laughing maniacally is always the best response.
But me, I'm nothing like those guys, man.
If that's true, then you're worse than a beta tester! You're a goddamn cheater, that's what you are!
Because being better at a game than noobs qualifies as cheating. Can we rename this show Edge Art Online, please?
When we were fighting the boss, you called me by my name.
I wasn't trying to be rude.
So you act like a dick to everyone else, but you're fine with this bitch?
How'd you even know it?
You'll see another HP gauge under yours. There's a name written right next to it, yeah?
Kirito.
You just killed the boss and still don't know how to do that shit?
I was wondering what level you're at.
Level 20?
Really? You're at our level and still a solo player?
Anyone who's played an MMO knows that a solo player can't get to higher levels than people who have been in guilds. Antisocial Kirito is supposed to be antisocial, but is actually social. Time skip of half a year. Time skip of 27 floors.
We've got 200,000 coal!
Wow!
We still have no idea what the fuck a coal is worth.
Sachi went off somewhere and hasn't come back yet. We're heading to the dungeon now. Please let me know if you find anything out.
No one else thought of doing this tracking bullshit before?
We'll clear this game and go home soon.
I'm crying so much right now. You just can't see it because you can't see my face.
Kirito?
It's okay. I promise you're going to survive.
She just said your name and you respond with that? This dialogue makes me want to barf. Oh goody, another 1 month time skip.
No way! A hidden door?
I thought you said you knew shit even information brokers didn't know.
I know a bunch of other things too. More than you can imagine. More than any info broker.
It's a trap, guys! It's a trap!
Time skip of 22 floors.
That's right. It's my fault. My arrogance killed you. All of you.
How would telling them your level change that outcome? They died because they were too stupid and fell for an obvious trap.